Beautiful space. Can we give a round of applause to Bailey Miller? Bailey just put out her second album on a local record label named Whited Sepulchre, and she plays around town with some frequency, so you should totally catch Bailey, and you should go. She's on Spotify and all the other places that digital music exists these days. Banquet. So go check out Bailey Miller's work. I'm Nate Morehouse. I'm the director of the Institute for Research and Sensing, which is what has brought tonight's conversation to you. We're an interdisciplinary research institute at the University of Cincinnati. We have been in existence about a year and a half. This is one of the quite a few things that we do as a research institute. Our subject area is sensing and perception and sensor technology development. But we approach that not just from science and technology and engineering, but also by bringing in voices from the humanities, the social sciences, and the fine and performing arts. So the Alloy series, which you're at tonight, is a pretty good capture of what that feels like. You'll see the conversation is going to have a real diversity of voices. It will go to places that it might not go if it was just engineers or just geologists. It's going to wander. That's the whole point of it. Is to entertain new vistas in this subject area, which has been something that the University of Cincinnati has really been focused on for many years, but has not really organized in this way. We run a graduate program as well, and we have an annual conference and festival of sensing. It's May 17th and 18th this year, open to the public. Should be a real showcase of not just the science, technology, and engineering and mathematics behind sensing and perception, but also cultural explorations of this, ethical questions associated with these things. Fine and performing arts should be a fantastic event. So I did want to offer Amy Hunter a few minutes to chat a little bit about where you are to orient you. So go ahead, Amy.
Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Amy Hunter. I am the head of events and marketing here at the Mercantile Library, and for just about all of our events, the ship's bell from the USS Cincinnati gets rung 6 times. It's a call to something, to ring it 6 times. And so.
Call to order.
It is a yes. Loved it, I don't know. But anyhow, how many of you have never been here before tonight? I love that. I love watching people experience this space for the first time. And I hope tonight, if it was your first, I hope it's not your last. We are a membership library. Anyone can join the library. We were founded in 1835, and we've been at this address, 414 Walnut Street, since 1840. And 1840 began our relationship with the University of Cincinnati. They were our first landlord. It was technically Cincinnati College, which was founded in 1819, which is how UC gets to claim the 1819. It didn't become the University of Cincinnati until much later. But we have a long and happy relationship with all sorts of departments at UC. And since 1840, like I said, we've been here. This is the 4th building we've occupied at this space. This building was built in, construction started in 1902. We moved out temporarily, moved back in 1904. And we are undergoing an expansion because the building has been sold. And floors 2 through 10 are getting converted into apartments. And then we are taking over the entire 12th story because we've kind of outgrown our space. In the last 7 or 8 years, we've increased the amount of events that we do, and I'm thrilled to see all of you here. We do close to 200 events a year, big ones and small ones, medium-sized ones, and that doesn't even include the yoga twice a week that's free to members. We have a student rate. If any of you are students, it goes for graduate students, postdoc, all of that. That's $30 a year. Individual memberships start at $65, and honestly, it's kind of the best bargain in the city. Everything's on our website. I'm thrilled to have all of you here tonight. Because really amazing things have happened in this space. And I feel like this is the kind of audience, I don't say this to every group that I talk to, but so many amazing things have happened here that I feel like the walls hold the energy. And what you guys are about to do tonight just contributes to that. So thank you very much. If you have any questions about the library, feel free to ask. So enjoy the evening.
Awesome.
All right. So I just saw Sol run to the restroom. So I'm gonna buy some time because he's next on our program. We're gonna have spoken word by Sol in just a minute here. A few other things to mention. So the Institute for Research in Sensing, or IRiS, is supported by the University of Cincinnati, but we also have external partners that we work with, and I wanted to highlight those because they also help to provide funding for these types of events. So this year, our 4 external partners are Clovernook Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. They're the world's largest producer of Braille, and they're in College Hill. And our next alloy on March 23rd is going to be there. You can tour the Braille presses, amongst other really cool things that you'll get a chance to experience there. So they're one of our external partners. We're partnered with Kroger, with the Environmental Protection Agency, and with the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. And they are partners with us not just as an institute, but also with our graduate student curriculum. They pose challenges to teams of graduate students, and those graduate students then go on to try to develop novel solutions by pooling really different disciplines. So we have an English PhD student in the program, a nursing PhD student in the program, biology, aerospace, engineering, etc. So these teams come together with really unusual competencies to respond to challenges that are facing everything from environmental protection to telehealth and telemedicine. That is an area that Kroger is pushing into right now. So want to thank those external partners. And so with that, we mentioned the owl. Oh yeah. We are streaming this live. Hi, internet. We stream this live, and we have a virtual audience that can chime in and ask questions. So the way that these alloy discussions work is that we've invited 5 people. Cassandra Jones, hi Cassandra, hello, is going to introduce our 5 invited voices, but they're not meant to be the only people talking tonight. Actually, when these work really well, the audience participates and is speaking about as much of the time as the folks that we've invited. And that includes our online audience who are with us thanks to the little meeting owl that's in the center there. And this also allows us to archive the conversation. So if you heard something tonight, you would really piqued your interest, but you didn't write it down, you can go back and find that on our YouTube channel. So, but without further ado, I want to introduce Sol, who is here with us. Sol is a local poet, spoken word artist, and MC. He also is coordinating a multimedia event in commemoration of Paul Lord's Dunbar. And he'll say a little bit more about that as part of his performance tonight. But the stage is yours, wherever you'd like to be.
Hello.
Hello.
It's been a while since I've been in this lovely library. I love the acoustics here, so it touched my mind. So I'm gonna tell y'all a story. If that's cool. Is that cool?
Yes.
Okay. The difference between. You eliminated the distance between. The very instant our eyes came to greet. Summer's middle passage of my heart's flutter spring. I swore my perception was dimmed by a light white gleam. Doves chirping in the east background as if I'm waiting for my bride to come. You know, falling rose petals see. I see in the curls of her hair a flower. Little did I know the concrete from which it grown. Yet at this moment, she chose to show the best side of her growth. Not a gimmick, yet a snippet of how many times your existence made my heart overflow. Not an overload, more like a shoulder blow. to keep myself in check. Build a self-respect to give respect unto her. A challenge for me, indeed, to be at my very best. The white linen dress that cuddles her vivacious frame only adds clarity to a verity, I must confess. It was hard pressed not giving in the vignettes of my hard pressed in the software, putting under the bed like Jay Holiday all day. It was holiday, but I will digress. But then surely you jest. As I said before, there was some concrete. Well, other ladies never wish she compete because she a tomboy with gloves, jeans, who says she don't really like to get dressy. So it begs me to say why she choose today. And we had a swimming party. You could tell I swim hardly. Barely got a note in my throat to focus the articulation of the simple phrase, I love. On her beauty, I'm choked up. Gave me a shot of Budweiser, I might have been up. And I'm used to drinking Jack and Crown. I've never been this toe up. Pardon me. Extra though. She is secretly stroking emotions once unknown to me, soon to come ashore for all of my heart to see. End quote. Now we're wind to being this toe up. Showed up just as you showed up. I felt the difference between, for you levitated me off my feet, made every cell that I could possibly register move their feet. As the flip-flops she wore, showing off those cute little toes to the world bold, despite vulnerability you hold, was a reflection of me. An expression, open and free. And though vividly sensitive I be, despite the investments of past hurt and rejection, my last moment of aggression, cast by human oppressions, I peer past all that depression to look at you. That makes me happy. Because as I look at you, just as your name states, heaven, that's all I can see. Because beauty's in the eyes of the holder. Your face describes God as a sculptor, with a smile that tries to child in me to be safe, release the hate that keeps me in the safe, to play in the rain without any constraint. The spiritual manifests itself in the physical. I know this to be quite literal. The words of this poem are too minimal to convey the essentials of an experience I deem quintessential. I'm glad what I believe to be coincidental happened to me that very day. Y'all can call me a nostalgic fool, but I still replay that first change in my frequency waves. Because you eliminate the distance between me and you with a single instance of seeing you. As I held your hands, I learned a lesson in truth. There's really no difference between you and me. I know what I do for you. This is what you do for me. Clear as your eyes, reflected off mine, you help me see me. And I miss you due to the distance now between. Now I feel forgotten, lost at the bottom. Happiness stayed for the weekend. Mundanes left my wounds hollow. The writings on my walls may be scared away. Cursed incantations known as feelings I see every day. Building up body mass seems like a faulty mask when you can't help but throw yourself in a body bag. Full bar reception for this full-on rejection. Learning to pull myself together, still I struggle with disconnection. Because I know myself too long to know I love and hate myself. I am too damn smart to know my smarts are bad for my health. Such wealth holds a consequence, so ain't it coincidence? Hypersensitivities, the reason confidence was never my best acknowledgement. If my brain has a plethora of options just to abolish it. Looking down my history of friends, most of the company was misery. Not their fault, if they was attracted to my energy. Apples, friends, enemies, putting it quite simply, I can be my favorite friend. So it shouldn't be that hard to see being the best friend to me doesn't always feel what's best for me. Can y'all see? Painting shades of me, painfully, sometimes aimlessly. Yet my aim's to be more than what I've been shamed to be, not letting these oceans of emotions make a cave. The stress of my fears, depression from my tears can remind me that those changes are near. And at this moment, all I want to do is say here. But this pen tip is looking more like slit wrist. I think I'll just leave it here. Because my best friend is calling, and he still needs me here. Because I'm a survivor, a black survivor. Yes, I'm a survivor, another black survivor. Yes, I'm a survivor, a black survivor. Yes, I'm a survivor, a black survivor. On an episode of Like It Is with the late great Gil Noble, which you can view on YouTube, Father Marley was asked what led to the most militant effort of a record of his known as Survival. His answer was the 1976 shooting that injured Marley, his wife, and his manager. Due to no fatalities from the event, he surmised that event was indeed survival. Afterwards, Gil proceeded to ask what happened on the night he was shot. It is here in this piece I offer my interpretation of his words and response. It was about 3 nights before that ambush in the night hit my door on Hope Road. Gunfire bombarded me in a dream. Bullets went through my arms, torso, and chest, left red to see my own mother caught one to the head. Naturally, any man would adhere to fear. Being at death, feeling so near, so close as here. Then that's when I hear, "Don't run, stand up." Despite what is happening now, repeat this to you now, don't run, stand up. So when the gunman came in 3 days to do what gunmen do, I would call that visual proof to be my ultimate truth. Don't run, stand up. I choose to stay alive. I am determined to survive. 'Cause I'm a survivor, a black survivor, just like you're a survivor, another black survivor. Yes, we are survivors. Yes, some black survivors. We are the survivors, black survivors, survivors, black survivors, 21st century natural born freedom fighters, legendary, luminary African souls on fire, live by the sun, spirits that were young, gold in our blood, the iron lion pride of Zion. Lock eyes on forward movement, though we never forget where we came from. Marching through the wintry cold winds of America, with our aim is to dismay, mainframe, and slay us just like the buffalo. But soldiers multiply and not die, because high or low, we are beautifully bold, adaptively adequate, intimately innovative, relentlessly resilient, spiritually sophisticated, compassion, vigilant, weight, militant, potential, limitless. In thought of killing it, finish it. Or keep on underestimating our understanding of the inner situation. For each one of us has the tools of creation. We're hands made strong by the hands of the Almighty to hold on through the troubles and struggles daily and nightly. Despite the tears that river our face, despite the fears that slither our way, our hearts beat on with that one drop rhythm. Staying the course on hope's road past the Babylonian system. Still waking up to live, turning over every stone, till they wake up to see us turn into cornerstones. We are not conquered. We are the independence of Zimbabwe. We are liberators, and revolution is coming at our pace. So why, naughty, why? In the city of Sin, shine, natty, shine. And if they come to ambush the night, remember this good word to recite. Don't run. Your life is your right. Your right is to live. So get up, stand up. Don't run. Live. So our original plan was to write a piece about time. So I'm really excited to be here. But it's been a weird week, so I couldn't read it out. But as he had mentioned, I'm doing a multimedia project of spoken word. The first event of this year will be this Saturday. It's a free event. We'll be having a Dayton Aviation Center at the Paul Lawrence Dunbar House. Paul Lawrence Dunbar was one of the first influential African American writers in America, and his work still has relevancy today. So the event is going to be with a few other poets I know from Cincinnati and Dayton, and we'll be talking about his life and times and offering our pieces in connection to his work. But I read a piece in my study of him I was going to read at a reading I did last Sunday, but the vibe wasn't correct, so I had to change it up. Somebody was going through something, so we got to change the vibe. But I thought this was apparent because we were talking about time, and I don't take it for granted that I get to express myself, not just only in my own lifetime, because there was a time when I was voiceless, so writing and creative writing and spoken word was my outlet to speak my voice. But as I look at time as not just in this country, but as humans, you were born in the right place. Don't ever think that you were born in the wrong time. You were in the right place. So this piece is called Then and Now, and it was just from his perspective, looking at how people dealt with things in his father's time to how he was going to get in the time that he was today, at the time he wrote. So it's called Then and Now. Then. He loved her, and through many years had paid his fair devoted court, until she worried and sneered to all his unloved sport. That night, within his chamber alone, he long sat writing by his bed, a note which his heart made moan for love, the morning found him dead. Now, like him, a man of later day was jilted by the maid he sought, and from her presence turned away, consumed by burning bitter thought. He sought his wound to wipe a curse, like him before, and die, I ween. Ah, no. He put his woes in verse, and then sold them to a magazine. My name is Soul. Thank you for your time. I'm enjoying it. I really enjoy this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Soul. Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. Great. So I am Cassandra Jones. I'm an assistant professor of Africana Studies at UC. I study Afrofuturism and Black women's use of memory and speculative fiction. And that's what kind of brought me to gather these folks here to have this conversation. Was really interested in, of course, our topic is about the time perception across scales, including deeper geologic time, time in music, seasonal time and plant life, cultural differences in experiencing and representing time, and of course, representations of time in speculative fiction and Afrofuturist writing. And so we'll think about how this measurement of time impacts our daily lives and how we can, by changing the ways that we think about it, what kind of possibilities open up to us. So I was very interested in time as a cultural construction. I'm thinking a lot about all the different types of calendars that exist, right? You've got the Hebrew calendar, you've got the Gregorian calendar, the Julian calendar, Chinese calendars, right? All these different calendars of the world that are only one small way of perceiving time. The way that we think about being on time, right, in different cultures and how those are they have their own understandings of time. Of course, non-absolute time. Unfortunately, we don't have an astrophysicist here today, so hopefully we've got some folks in the audience who can speak to this. And the way that time changes when we move to the outer edges of the galaxy and the sort of timey-wimey time of Doctor Who, right? We've got Western notions of linear time. We've got African notions like Zaza and Sumani time that are sort of more circular, right? All these amazing perceptions. And so as I was thinking about this, I really wanted to think, how do we sense time? And so who are some folks around me that I could bring together to have this conversation? So I'm gonna introduce them now. I'll just go in a circle, right? So we've got Dylan Ward. Let me make sure I get this information correct here, right? Associate Professor of Geology, who looks at geomorphology and numerical modeling, right? Camille Howard, who is our Master Gardener Volunteer and has an amazing home gardening, homesteading operation. She has produced 150 pounds of vegetables from her backyard in the last year and is looking to scale up to 1,000 pounds of vegetables. So she's going to be our expert talking about plant life and seasonal time. We've got Craig, is it Deach?
Deach, right.
Deach, okay, right, who is an associate professor and department head of geology, who looks at evolution of mountain chains, crustal tectonics, and landscape evolution. Really interesting. We've got James Creighton, who's a hip hop performer and producer. He's an audio engineer and owner of Visible Grid Media LLC. And finally, we have Brooke Crowley, who is you're a full professor. Right? Full professor of geology who studies stable isotope ecology and quaternary paleoecology. Right. So we're a little overrepresented on geologists, but there's so much to think about where time is concerned, especially when we're thinking outside of that range of human time or outside of the Anthropocene. And of course, this is a conversation that I want everyone here to be a part of. So I'm going to ask just a couple questions, and then when you feel that you want to participate, just raise your hand, and I will try to incorporate your questions into this larger conversation. So the first kind of question I want to ask is just a way to kind of get us all in here and help you to talk a little bit more about yourself and what you know. So what does your area of expertise tell us about time? I mean, this is a broad question, it's a giant question, but also a way to kind of enter into this conversation. Right? How is time important from your perspective? I mean, let's take that however you'd like. I can start. Right, I have the advantage of having written the question, so I thought about them a little bit. Well, I was thinking a lot about, as I mentioned, and I'm teaching a class on Afrofuturism right now, and one of the things that we're talking about is time as a social construction, and how it plays out, of course, through science fiction written by Black folks. Kindred is one of those. We're reading that right now, where you have a Black woman from the 1970s, sort of sucked back through time to the early 1800s to save a white slave owning ancestor of hers repeatedly. And through that, she's sort of forced to confront her own kind of lost family history. She's complicit with that history, and she loses an arm at the end of the story traveling through time. So engaging with that history leaves her marked. And part of what Afrofuturism does is think about the linking of the past, the present, and the future, and how we always need to know where we came from to understand where we are and look forward in a way to sort of shape that. So thinking about time beyond our Western conceptions and thinking about Zaza or Zamani time, which is a Swahili idea about time, that is based on cultural memory, right? That Zaza time is about living memory and who is alive that can remember you and speak your name, whereas Zamani time extends to kind of an ancestral timeline, just a little bit into the future. When you look at it mapped, it sort of looks like a circle. It's very different from Western view of time as time's arrow, right? So that, I think, shapes a lot of how we see the world, and it shapes a lot of the kind of questions that we ask, particularly in science. And so that's part of what brings me here and the way that my particular expertise thinks about time. So I wanted to kind of, I guess, ask you the same idea. We were talking earlier about early introduction.
You know, I've had experience measuring time in a very kind of, I guess it's an abstract way, but it's also a very physical way, because you determine how many atoms of various kinds are contained in little teeny tiny minerals that are no wider than your hair in your head, and you get involved with this amazing technology, and when you measure the atoms, you of course can't see them, and so you rely on the veracity of this instrument you're using, but you come away with a number. You have a number that's you can write on a piece of paper and look at, and it's in that way, it's very real, but it's a very abstract number, because the time you determine, the age of something you determine is far beyond, in my opinion, the comprehension that we can really truly understand 435 million years, right? So,
no.
But it's real, because I believe in the physics, I believe in the in the way this is done. I believe in atoms and electrons and all that other stuff. So it's like, it's a real thing, and it's this little secret way of doing things and knowing things.
Right, yeah, that's amazing. So what, can you explain deep time for us? What that idea, right? Big questions.
Oh,
But what
my
does that
God.
mean? I mean, for those of us who are curious, and curious minds, inquiring minds want to know.
So when I try to get this across pretty early in my classes, and so one of the ways I do it is I take a 100-foot tape measure out in the hall, which is about 120 feet long, so it works. So I take a 100-foot tape measure out, we lay it out, and without looking anything up, I ask the students to place where certain big events in Earth's history happen along that line. Like the formation of Earth is at the beginning, or the formation of the solar system and the Earth together, and then there's formation of the moon, and then there's like first simple life, there's great oxygenation event, there's complex life, and then there's like the dinosaurs, and then the dinosaurs die out, and then hominids, and then humans, and then and so forth, and then like the Ice Age. So it's just like this 7 or 8 things, I ask them to place in the timeline, and they end up every time spread almost equally across 2.5 billion years, represented by 100 feet. And then we do the math. We calculate where they should be on that timeline. Everything moves, almost everything moves into the last quarter of the tape. A lot of it, most of it actually moves into the last 10% of the tape. 4.5 billion years, complex life is 540 million years. That's the last 10% of Earth's history-ish.
Wow.
Yeah. And so everything ends up really compressed. And like the time that humans have been around, I mean, be generous to 2 million years, or our immediate ancestors, it's like the little metal piece at the end of the tape that hooks it on. It's not even that wide. Like,
Right, yeah.
And that's at first just the perception, and then correction of that perception is, I don't know. I mean, it still blows my mind, honestly. But the dinosaurs were around for quite a bit longer than the amount of time that has passed since.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it's
Amazing.
not how I always thought about it until I started doing things like this. Honestly.
What do you think gardening and like understanding seasons and kind of like tell us about time?
And so with gardening, if you are a gardener, you're aware that there are zones. And so those zones correlate to when your first and last frost date is, depending on where you live. And so there are people in Atlanta, there are people in Houston right now who are already putting things in the ground because it is warm enough to do so. Whereas those of us here in Ohio are waiting patiently and getting our feelings hurt by these warm days that are fooling us. But I think in addition to even just seasonal time, there are certain plants that are going to grow best based on the length of a day. Onions are a really good example. There are long day onions, there are short day onions, there are medium day onions. Your summer vegetables, they thrive because they have those 12 hours of sunlight in which they can grow. Whereas some things that you can put in the ground here next month, like your greens, they don't need that much sun. And so those are some things that you have to consider when you're thinking about gardening. And I think too, it's fine to get the Farmer's Almanac. I like it, I read it. And it does give you some clues. But I think that one thing that the Farmer's Almanac isn't able to take into account now is how much our earth is changing, how much the climate is changing. And so again, 75 degrees in February in Ohio is such a strange phenomenon. And it affects that ability to plant. And I think that doing this for a while, you start to get that innate sense of, yes, the weather feels good, but this isn't quite right. I'm going to wait. I'm not going to start my seeds yet, or maybe I'll start them, but I'm going to keep them in the house a little while. I know not to trust that first frost date. But I think that's something that comes with time and it comes with practice. And so again, even that is a sense of time, just having that experience to know when you might be able to jump the gun here and when it might be best to wait.
And the plants are confused.
Very
I
much
mean, I saw on campus just today, hellebores blooming.
Yes.
And they're the earliest plants, the earliest flowers to bloom. They should not be blooming in February. No way. I mean, truly well-developed flowers coming out of the ground. Oh, go ahead.
In your experience with gardening, have you developed maybe just a higher sense of the timing and the climate outside of what conventional knowledge would say? Whereas you know how you can go outside, some people, it's gonna rain in 3 days. That type of sense just about your gardening, where you're like, I know this weather says this, and this is what the fork, but I know that around this time, this shouldn't be doing this.
Yes.
And I can.
So I think that I have. This will be my 8th season gardening here in Cincinnati. And I'm in gardening groups on Facebook, and I watch everyone start their seeds very lovingly, very diligently, and I've done that. But the last couple of years, I've thought about it, and I've said, no, it just doesn't feel right. And so I've been doing a lot more direct sowing, putting things straight into the ground instead of starting my seeds at home. And honestly, I think I'm doing better. I think I'm having a lot less loss. It's just that doing it when it feels right, paying attention to when the perennials are coming up and actually living. I have a beautiful magnolia tree in my backyard that has bloomed entirely too early the last 3 years, and I get these gorgeous flowers, and then we get a frost and the whole tree falls apart. And so that's something that I sometimes use as a barometer. But I think just kind of trusting that instinct, and also just paying attention to the weather. It's interesting how many people garden but don't watch a weather forecast or don't look at the 14 days just to kind of see how is this going to go.
Right.
And so those are things that I pay attention to, and I think that I have had a lot more success kind of being more intuitive.
Walking your dogs helps with the understanding the
Yes,
weather.
absolutely, definitely.
What about in music? How can we learn about time now?
I've been thinking about this for a while now, and it's interesting. Initially, my thought is there is physical time in music, timekeeping in music, tempo and metronome and time in music. And I was trying to think, what's a more abstract thought about this? And I heard a song from 20 some odd years ago, and that song immediately put me in a place emotionally, mentally, and almost physically, because it takes you there.
Right, your heart can start racing, right? Yeah.
And that made me think, where do these rhythms come from that bring this type of nostalgia? Where does this certain guitar riff that will take you to a place that maybe you haven't even thought about, but is still in your own personal timeline, and it takes that certain key to access it. So that's kind of where I've been at the past few days. And then also, I've been thinking about rhythm and beat as it interacts with your human rhythm, your heartbeat, your pulse, your steps, and how certain music will raise your heart, lower your heart rate. You'll exercise harder to certain music because of the time. But yeah, that's kind of where I've been with music and time and the perception of it here lately.
Yeah, that's really interesting too. I hadn't really thought about that, the way that music transports you, right?
Yeah.
And the physical effects that you can have listening to particular beats.
And there's a thing, it transcends any culture. It's a human thing. If there's a certain 4 on the floor, your brain does a certain thing automatically.
Right.
Even if you don't have physical rhythm, your brain still does it. And I thought that was amazing. You can go from,
Mm-hmm.
Scotland to Africa and the same. Whoa.
Right, toes start tapping,
Yeah,
head start
absolutely.
nodding.
I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah, right. And the way that indigenous cultures will talk about the heartbeat as a drum, right?
Yes,
that it's
absolutely.
just this sort of constant. I think about this a lot sometimes like being in space, you can't hear anything, that it's so quiet that you can hear your own heartbeat.
Mhm.
I don't like to think about that too much, honestly. It freaks me out, but
I would rap to it.
yeah. Okay, right, you got your own metronome. Hopefully it doesn't skip. Right.
Right.
They all skip.
Right. At some point.
I'm kind of curious too, if we're all using the word time, do you think that we're all kind of talking about the same thing? Are these different concepts? I didn't give you a chance to answer the first question if you want to go back to that.
Yeah, I'll go back to the first question. I'm not sure I'm ready to answer this new one.
Okay.
So for me, I think about time where I use the past to inform the present and the future.
Mm-hmm.
So the time scales I think on are varied. They're really deep time that Dylan was talking about necessarily, but it could be decades to centuries or millennia, maybe millions of years.
Wow.
But I try to understand how things were before major change happened. Usually it's human-induced change, like places where we didn't have people and then we had people are the places I tend to work, like islands that were isolated. So we have a clear before and then after, and then we have the current situation, which is usually not very good in terms of biology. And so I try to go back before that disturbance occurred and figure out what the animals and the plants were doing, how they interacted, what the environment was like. And then I use that information. I monitor what happened with the change. So things went extinct, some things adapted, some things are new and are kind of wreaking havoc or just fitting into the ecosystem. And I use that to try to interpret and project into the future what the big things are that are problematic. So what were the triggers in the past? How can we interpret and use that information to prevent future loss and protect biodiversity and manage things properly, make informed decisions about how to proceed. So that's my big thing about time is I really do use the past to understand now. And the longer the time scale you have, the more information and data you have. So if you only look back a couple decades, it's not enough. It's still useful, but if you can really go back farther, it's much more informative. If you go too far, things are really different. And it's not useful.
But the
anymore.
before and after is interesting.
Yeah.
That transition.
We all have before and afters.
Yes.
Right, yeah,
Yeah, I
think.
personal and,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think so, yeah.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, certainly, if we're thinking about like, right, colonization, that's a whole really interesting question for me, right, the before and the after, and then the attempt to kind of construct a new identity in the kind of aftermath and an attempt to decolonize one's culture and one's imagination.
They're still learning about the before.
Right, yeah.
And that's crazy. As you learn more about the before, it starts changing the present and the after. It's like, well, hold on, that means this. Therefore, we have to change. Time.
Just especially too, I am fascinated by this idea, and I think this is probably a totally different direction, but the way that we observe something and how that changes the event itself. I mean, in like participant observation studies as well, but also a little bit, I'm out on my depth here, in astrophysics, right? As we observe like a particle and then the movement of that particle changes based on our observation of it. I think that is a fascinating question, before and after, and our
Before and
own,
after.
I don't know.
And then
our own agency.
does that particle even exist if we don't see it? If we're not looking? Is that there? But that's neither here nor there. That's a different question.
I think in listening to kind of the geological conversations and then in reference to what I'm thinking about in gardening, I don't think we are talking about the same thing, because I think that with geology, I think it's more of a longitudinal data. And you can go back and back and back, but you're still looking at how things play out over a very long period of time. With gardening, everything is cyclical. And so we're talking about seasons that come and go and come back, day and night. Even with something like succession planting, where I can plant something this week, I can plant more of it next week, because I want to harvest over time instead of harvesting all at once. And so I don't think those are quite the same thing. I think it's a much different way of looking at things.
Well, let me offer a thought that might.
We had a question.
Oh,
I was going to ask you about, do you regard the lunar cycle? So many people, when they're planting, think that when there's a full moon, that's when it's coldest.
yes.
And that's a very old concept. I didn't know if that's something.
It's something that I haven't done, but it's something that I'm starting to look more into. Planting on the lunar cycle, harvesting on the lunar cycle. And so I think it's something that I'm going to try to do a little bit this year. And just kind of have that experimentation and see if I feel that that has some merit. Definitely.
Good questions.
Yeah, so this has come up in a few of your points. We were talking about radiocarbon dating or something, which is fundamentally, as I understand it, that's a probabilistic phenomenon. It's entirely possible that one specific atom just sit there forever, never decay. And you're talking about first frost and last frost, and my understanding the dates they give you in the almanac are also probabilities. It's like, this is the date after which you're probably not going to get any more frost. And
Right.
just change a number, like 30%.
Right.
So in sort of contrast to the bell invoking us, calling us to action, telling us what to do, in contrast to the metronome, defining absolute time, do you have any like probabilistic wobblier understanding for advances of time?
I think so. I think that everything with gardening is a probability. Absolutely everything. If the weather does some kind of freak thing that we don't expect it to do, if all of the seeds that I plant don't germinate, and even the ones who do germinate may not necessarily fruit. Because again, if the weather is hotter than is usual, then I may lose some things. If there are less prey animals and there are lots of rabbits.
Right.
And so gardening is one of those things that I think it takes a lot of patience because there are no guarantees with it. You have to be a lot more, I think, gentle with yourself to be a gardener. You have to be able to weather those moments where you have so much disappointment because you have lost an entire bed of something, or because a frost hit and strawberries. Strawberries are the thing that I lost, 50 plants of strawberries. But I think that the nice thing about gardening too is because you have such a length of time, you get to have those successes that pop up. And so you get an errant tomato plant that just does the absolute most, and you've got tomatoes all summer. My favorite thing is that I've been blessed the last 2 years to harvest a watermelon in November. And I mean, beautiful, red, sweet watermelons when they are long out of season. And those are the things that I think make me keep coming back for more. But yeah, it is a much more probabilistic thing.
I think it's a very interesting question. And, you know, it's impossible to date or know the age of everything. And we only have a few points here and there, right? So in between times, it's like, you really have to, you know, and I think that's why a lot of geology people play music, we read books, we like the humanities, because we have to use our imaginations in those intervals where time is a little adrift. And that's you know, that's kind of an interesting, that's kind of the fun part in a way.
It's wobbly that historiography is wobbly. It's like, it's probably that then.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the seasons, and the seasons are a reflection of the climate, which is driven by where the Earth is around the sun and how the shape of that orbit changes over different periods, which are on 10,000 year kind of lengths. That's the length of time we're talking about the change, but think about the ice ages, that's 10,000 year periods. Those are the scope of climate changes that we see. And of course, in that context, the modern climate changes are very, very fast. But coming back to the probabilistic idea, climate is the statistics of weather. Right? It's the mean and standard deviation. It's when is the first frost date, plus or minus.
Right.
Yeah, and you gotta use your instincts to know it's gonna be.
You gotta bet on the spread.
Don't trust that groundhog.
Never trust the
Hangs wild.
But those cycles that are driven by the state of the Earth's climate, which give us our seasons and how long the seasons are and how extreme they are at different points in the Earth's history, those rhythms are present. We can see them in the Earth's record. So basically, these seasons that govern your planting schedule are there. And one of the ways that we find them, and I'm just going to make one more connection here. When we look at these signals, what we're looking at is maybe, say, deep sea sediment that's got little tiny bugs in it, and we measure isotopes of water in there, and we can say something about sea level, which tells us something about climate. We can analyze that signal like it's a sound wave, and we can decompose it into its spectrum. And we can look at the cycles that are present through that signal over a long period of geologic history. And what pops out are, well, there's seasonality if you have record that fine-grained, and if not, you see the decadal if you're lucky, and the centennial, you see 1,000-year cycles, you see the glaciation cycles, and so you see peaks coming out just like on the spectrogram in a music studio. So I don't know. I think there's some conceptual connections between these ideas of cyclicity and then kind of the long-term, more linear way that I think about the rock record, because it has all those little wiggles in it, it has those cycles in it.
And you talking about that wiggle, and I can see that. I remember learning about like sound waves and things. And so that makes me think about, I've started seedlings and played music for them. And it's interesting to me what my plants seem to like versus what they don't. Peas like Gershwin. I have no idea. My peas love Rhapsody in Blue, which is one of my favorite songs. And they grew gangbusters. I've also noticed that I think a lot of my greens, very interesting, they like Tupac. I don't know why. But yeah, it's been very interesting to see that different music, different beats, it does seem to really affect the way that my plants grow. And that's another thing that I've been experimenting with a bit
That's
more.
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in this idea because I think a lot about, as you mentioned, right, like human migration around the planet and the kinds of impacts we've had in those places and the foods that we bring with us from different places. And I think it's very interesting that greens have such a deep connection to us as Black folks, right? Emerging from Africa, and that would respond to a similar beat, a similar like drum rhythm that might exist in that music.
And see, now I want to play Afro beats for my okra.
Right? Yes. Like I would love to think more about that. Like that is really interesting.
That really needs to be a whole experiment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a dissertation.
Yeah,
that's
that needs to
like,
be a whole thing.
yeah. Who's got good grad students? Like, we get somebody on
My
this.
goodness.
I think that's really interesting.
But this was experimented with, and supposedly experimented with. It was quite a famous period for music made for plants to grow. And it's Dorothy Retallick, who was the pioneer there, and whose research was copied by many others, repeated unquestioningly. The problem with Dorothy Retallick is that she was a fundamental Christian and a believer in Nixon's war on drugs. So she felt that the music that was most deleterious to plants was what she called acid rock, Hendrix, Led Zeppelin. The music that was most beneficial was the Bacharach, And both rappers share their beliefs. So I wonder, I think you have to look a little closely at your predilections, perhaps for hip hop or whatever it is,
Right.
and whether your plants are in fact responding to your good feelings. Well,
Interesting, yeah, that's a good point. That's a very
Yeah.
good point.
Because I was thinking about that, like about that study. I read a little bit about it, that it was very much based on like her perceptions of, right, what good music was and what bad music was, and sort of deleterious effects you mentioned like on culture. And I was thinking too about how that's got a sort of racialized approach to it as well. If we think about the history of rock and roll as being like a Black art form, so it's like if we're saying that rock and roll music is dangerous, as we did right in the 1950s and 60s, and it's also dangerous not only to human minds and like development, but also to plants, right? Like, what does it mean then to expand that to like multiple forms of music? Like, could this be a way to revisit those kinds of questions?
she had 8 grandchildren. She was very worried about the impact of drugs on their upbringing.
Right.
Yeah,
And what
a
impact
number
does
of
music
agendas.
have on drugs? Like, I
Exactly.
would like to know that as well. Like,
Are your drugs better because of what music
right,
did?
right. Well, the plants that you can grow that are drugs,
There you
like, what impact does that have? That would be very
That would
interesting.
be interesting.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. You definitely need some federal funding to make that
Uh-huh.
happen in a way that
Yeah.
won't get you arrested. But, yeah.
Well, I wanted to just throw something in there. When I've been looking at like the history of like not the history of music, but you know, before we could create instruments as people, we actually observed sound first. So rather than us producing sounds for the plants, maybe the environment helped produce music for us to just
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And plants do make music. I mean,
Yeah.
They do emit sound and respond to vibration, right? The way that there are those plants that if you make a loud noise, they curl up on themselves. Or
Plants that move a certain direction in the wind so that it's making a small vibration as it goes across, and you hear a tiny whistle and you have no idea where it's coming from, but it's that slight turn to get the breeze across.
that's interesting. I think it would be very interesting for us to, this is kind of part of one of the things that I was interested in thinking about in this conversation, about what those possibilities are for thinking about the world when we think about time beyond like humanity, right? Beyond ourselves, beyond the Anthropocene, and if we start to listen to glaciers or to, right, all these other things, what are they telling us? What can they tell us about ourselves? Do you have a question?
This is sort of related. I was just thinking, I don't know if any of you have heard about the philosophy of long-termism, but I've been reading into this recently. So a lot of billionaires and philanthropists follow this ideology that it's more important to focus morally on the ultra long-term future of life. And they use that ideology in millions of years from now, and they use that ideology to justify extreme inequality in the present because it's so important to get to Mars or to do these big technological things. So I was curious if you have any just thoughts, especially with these big time scales and how that can maybe induce wonder and interest in things beyond our human perspective, but also how that might be co-opted by various ideologies that impact the present.
Right. Oh gosh, everything's co-opted. Yeah.
What's interesting to me about that is those ideologies are based on a lot of these people's personal preferences.
Yeah.
And they're also based on things that they know they're destroying right now. So you have to look a million years into the future at Mars if you know that right now you're destroying Earth. So it's like the concept is marvelous if it were to protect humanity. But that was my only thought on that.
What do you think about that? Because you look a lot at the biodiversity and protection of things.
Yeah, so I have not heard of long-termism before, but I find it disheartening, I guess, because as you were saying, a lot of the folks who are able, they have the capacity to make change at a scale that really would make a difference, tend to think. I thought they were thinking very selfishly often, in their own life, but to justify things on a scale that, who knows where we'll be in a million years, but if we don't have any resources left now, we're not going to get wherever that is. So I think in my own life, there's a lot of things about the way the world is that are depressing. And there's also a lot of opportunity though. So, yeah, I don't know.
But a common idea, and I don't subscribe to it myself, is that people who understand Earth history and who are comfortable talking about millions of years, they say, oh well, the humans are so trivial. We're here in a flick of not even the smallest little flick of time you can possibly imagine.
The silver thing at the end of the.
Not even that. I mean, they say if you stretch your arms out like this with it, and you just lightly do a fingernail with an emery board, and I'm not sure everybody here knows what an emery board is, but I'm old enough to know what an emery board is. That's human history, just gone.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think that's, for me anyway, I don't think that's so. I do understand a lot about Earth history, but I don't feel that trivializes our lives or our civilization. And I think it's sort of, in fact, kind of has the opposite effect, or you live in this kind of duality. And this, to me, this futurism is like a trivialization of time in a way.
Certainly the impact that we've had is much, much grander than the amount of time we've been present.
You can say that again.
I feel like the long-termist arguments bring up Pascal's wager as far as time goes, just by invoking the possibility of billions of years with trillions of humans astride every star in the universe. And by invoking that possibility, they say anything that even remotely reduces that by the tiniest bit has to be completely awful, because the upside is so big. That's literally Pascal's wager, which when you use it rhetorically like this, it's more like Pascal's money. It's like, believe what I tell you to believe, because I'm telling you that the upside is infinite and the downside of disagreement is also infinite. So you do that.
So I think that study would have some validity to it because music does, it's rhythm. So if it affects our heartbeat, of course it's going to affect the environment around it. So any cultural environment, the world is going to adapt to whatever it's thrown at it, whether it's positive or negative, it's going to adapt to survive it. So I think that any rhythm is going to naturally, that you only listen to Beethoven or Metallica or George Jones or whatever, your environment is going to feel that, okay, this is the environment I'm living in, let me adapt to those rules. But I was thinking when you was talking about, when you was talking about, not specifically, I was thinking most of lava and how they form different rocks and sediments, like obsidian, diamonds, etc. There's no perception of time, it's just doing what it's doing. So I question myself if our current ideal time, working 9 to 5, 20% hours a day, is that really having any real validity to it? I know we're measuring it is, but when I create, I at least put myself in about 30 minutes. I can write 30 minutes and feel like 30 minutes, but I can be in a flow state and I feel like I'm there for 2 hours and I feel really energized. So is that me changing my perception of me in those moments? And finding that space in between, or is it on my head? Someone has said to affect perception. So I think how we view time has a big influence on how we examine time.
Let me add to what he's saying, because I was thinking about this the other day. Time flies when you're having fun. Do you age the same? Do you age the same? If time flies, if you're having the most wonderful weekend and those 2 days go by.
That's a good question. I was thinking more in terms of perception, which I think is great.
Yes.
I've thought about this, I don't know why, a lot lately, maybe during COVID, where on the one hand, I can't believe 3 years has gone by. On the other hand, each day felt like a
3 years.
And I think like, maybe it's because I'm getting older and a little bit, and so my perception of what's a lot of time varies. But I find myself thinking about an octopus, which lives about 2 years or something like that. Is that about right? And so an octopus is a pretty intelligent animal. So there's at least the possibility. If we all live 2 years. Would everything we do scale so that what we perceive as a year now, if we only live 2 years, would feel like
50.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting.
I think COVID is such an interesting, it's an interesting lens to look at time through, because that was not necessarily my experience, that every day felt like a year. I know plenty of people who felt that way. But as a person who had just graduated with my first master's, and for the first time in 2.5 years was not working, didn't have class, didn't have homework, the world opened up to me. And so that was the year that the garden beds went in. So I have 11 raised beds in my backyard. My mother and I built those because we had the time. And I was able to start seeds. I was one of the failed sourdough experiments. I never did get around to it. But I was cooking 3 times a day, full meals from scratch, because I had the time. I learned how to can that year. I bought a pressure canner, I bought a steam canner. I learned how to make apple butter and strawberry jelly and all of these things. And it was just like, this is great. I have time to do all of these things. I was getting up with the sun and just having the time of my life. And so now that I'm back to work, it's just like, I'm very appreciative that I had that opportunity. I think that I think some people, and I was one of those people, we got an experience that we may not get again. And so there are a lot of ways in which it was traumatic and it was detrimental, but then there are so many ways in which we got to breathe in a way that we won't necessarily get to again.
I just clarify, I didn't view it as
Oh,
necessarily
no, not
negative.
at all.
In fact, my view was very much like yours. But in many cases, were very full days.
Yes.
And that's why.
Right.
Yeah,
And
but this all goes back to the perception.
Absolutely.
Point.
That's
Absolutely.
it. Because my experience with COVID was, I had to be a teacher now.
Right.
I had to be a chauffeur. I had to, you know what I mean? So many extra things that I wasn't accustomed to. Now, looking back in hindsight, it was a wonderful time. You know what I mean? Just to be able to get closer to my kids. I had this whole theory that my next door neighbor was going to take over the world, because she had this whole plant network that she was talking to magically through her backyard. So, you know what I mean? That whole time really, it went so quickly.
Right.
And it was, between that and the actual pandemic itself and what it was doing to, to our people in the country. So it was like, quick. I have no idea why it's already 2023.
Right.
No idea
And
why.
where did those years go?
Yeah. My children are so tall. And it seemed to happen yesterday.
Right.
I think in relation to the sensing, it kind of feels like Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5 in context of the Tralfamadorians, where in their perception of time, all events occur at the same time, but they're able to perceive them individually instead of our linear perception of time. As the book may be a pointing allegory for PTSD, it still could argue that these moments of the pandemic and still today feel like these days happen out of order, and they happen in odd moments.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. You had made the point that time flies when you're having fun. And when you said that, my very next thought was a watch pot never boils.
Absolutely.
And so, it is very much that idea of, and he had mentioned, do you age the same? And so it is something that it's weird. I feel like I think about it, but it's such an abstract concept to try to put into to make it make sense in my head. But I kind of think, I feel like you don't. I feel like when you're having those moments when things are fun and you're getting these new experiences, I can't help but wonder if that almost gives you some time back in a way.
Because how much does your brain have to perceive the time for it to affect your body?
Right, right.
Or is that even a thing? You know what I mean? So I think about that often.
Predictive on this because my grandmother is going to be 110 this year.
Wow.
And, we've talked a lot about how when you have more time, it can feel like you're, I guess, more present in it. But the thing that happens when you get old is you start to lose your senses, your ability to see, your ability to hear. And I think that time is a perception. And when you think about if you didn't have your senses, if you couldn't hear, if you couldn't see, how would you perceive time? Would it be like a suspension chamber where you're just kind of suspended in space and there's really no moving forward or backwards or no measure of it? And what would the feeling of that be? Because that's kind of where I'm looking at her as when she has no perception of time, she's kind of suspended in space.
I think that's the reason a lot of people do those sensory deprivation treatments. You know what I mean? You take your body, you cut off all your senses, you just lay there and you see what happens to your body. And it's so magic. I went to float in the water and it's nothing. I felt nothing and it was great. My whole body feels better. And you often wonder, like, is it because you're not dealing with gravity or is it because you cut off your perception of things moving along without you?
Is it just like you take some time to not have to think about anything for a while? And how rare is that?
Oh man.
You had your hand up.
Yeah, I just would like to return to Afrofuturism in a second, but your story about your grandmother made me think of John Cage's performance in 33 Seconds of Silence, so the famous silence piece that which there's no music, of course, but he talks of having assembled that from fragments of silence. So it's in 3 movements. It's like, I can't remember the time intervals, but the first is like 39 seconds, the second 2 minutes and 30, and the third is like 1:30. But he said, no, I actually, he says it sounds weird, but I assembled it from fragments of silence. And of course, during that piece, you hear nothing but the audience moving awkwardly, generally. And then he says, well, maybe I made a mistake, but it ended up cumulatively in 450 seconds. So I did working with nothing. It's not, of course, it's not meaningless, but there are people who have struggled with that concept. But I wondered what you might make of Campbell Brathwaite's, Greg Baden-Coates' concept of dialectic, which is an inversion or an attack on the Eurocentric concept of Hegel's dialectic, of linear argument and linear time. Of course, because with Hegel, it ends up with the logic ends up with a resolution, but it happens it happens linearly. For Brathwaite, being a Caribbean person, and ended up his life in Barbados, but he spent a lot of time in Jamaica, and he had taught in Ghana, studied in London, in Oxford. There's not many places you can go to in the Caribbean. The islands are small, but he saw it was the tides that provided the model of experience. But the tides themselves came from Africa, and they brought with them that history, which for Black Caribbeans was, of course, the awful history of Atlantic slavery, and that without tidal motion was what obliged you to deal with your history, which brought the history to you on a daily basis. And for those who believed in Drexel, the underwater kingdom of the enslaved people who had thrown themselves overboard or been thrown overboard, and somehow survived generations under that, also reminded you of that Afrofuturist history, right? I think that there are other concepts which come from other histories, other locations than our own, which can be valuable.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And there are a lot of Afrofuturist novels that deal with that idea of sensing time, sensing your own age. I'm thinking primarily of one by Nalo Hopkinson called The New Moon's Arms, where it's a woman who is entering, she's entering, what is that called?
Adolescence.
No. Why can't I? Menopause, thank you. Oh my goodness. Okay, right, and as she has hot flashes, thank you. I wanted to say menstruation. I was like, that is related, but not the word I'm looking for. As she has hot flashes, things from her past materialize and sort of drop down in front of her. And it becomes a sort of discovery of her own history and unpacking a kind of what has happened in her life at the same time that she meets mermaids and the stories that they have, folkloric stories about mer people related to, right, enslaved folks who had walked off of ships into the ocean, and what that had to do with the kind of ecological destruction that was also happening at the time. Like that all of these things were equally wrapped up in each other, so that memory, age, history, and time as nonlinear were kind of all connected. And spirituality was also sort of a part of that. So that worldview, where all of those things are tangled together, definitely has, there are like Western African roots in that, but that those themes are explored, I think, in really compelling ways. Nala Hawkinson? Yeah, that's the New Moon's artist.
And I think in science, in our science, time is not linear, in fact. I think it's kind of simplistic to say, okay, Earth history starts here and now we're here. But personally, I don't see it that way at all. Is this complicated swirling of events that accelerate and decelerate, that lay fallow for a long time, and then all of a sudden there are catastrophic things happen, and there's a blending of all sorts of processes and materials through time, and it's not a metronome at all, in my view, which is sort of, this is the real natural world kind of works like that, in my view, and I think. Our own sort of perception and construction of linear timescales is a construct.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Preston had a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, just as a note in there, the acceleration part is.
Preston?
Just real quick, does the concept of infinity, is that addressed in time, or is that a concept outside?
Ooh, good question.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, we need a cosmologist for that one.
or a priest.
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Or at least a mathematician.
I think I can't speak necessarily to the scientific or mathematical, but I do think about pop culture a lot, and I think about representation of time in pop culture. And I was thinking about this today, the way that eternity is represented in shows like The Good Place, right? That they have died, they've been dead for an extraordinarily long time when they decide to, I don't know, sort of end their consciousness, whatever. But I think that depiction of eternity is the closest I've come to seeing recently in recent years. I don't know if there are other ones that other people have. That was something that came to mind.
I think about it sometimes with legacy. Do you eternally exist if you leave something behind that's going to be here for a very, very long time?
I think,
but then you have to think of the concept of forever.
Right.
Yeah,
I think
so it's still perception.
That's important there.
But if it's not remembered consciously, is it still remembered by culture?
Right. Or
by people that you influenced and the people that they influence.
Right. So it's
like the butterfly flapping its wings.
Right. You're still in there.
I just wanted to lob in a couple of things about perception of time. So one is that I think it's very linked to memory, right? When we have moments of real crisis, for example, where we can remember a whole, like time feels like it's in slow motion, that's associated with how much of what's happening is written into memory. And so that can make time feel like it stretches. So I do think there's a really interesting link between perception of time and the amount of memory that is occurring.
I think too with PTSD, as you mentioned before, right, that is like an intrusion of memory into the present. So it is a sort of skewed sense of time
and
that you
suddenly jumble this sense of ordering as well. The other thing I wanted to throw in is the concept of like octopus time. So so one of the ways that you can think about this is that our senses have different time signatures to the rate at which they can tell different distinct events apart from time. Something you think about is temporal acuity, right? So our eyes can see at this kind of light level somewhere between 30 and 50 events per second as being distinct from each other. Past that, they just blur together, right? So old movies used to be called flicks because they would flicker because they were at 15 frames per second, right? But it turns out that lots of other animals will have much higher rates. So if there was a little blue bottlefly flying around right now, it could see 200 events per second. Their eyes can see it at much faster. And what's interesting is there's all these mismatches in the animal kingdom of this way of perceiving time. Like prey fish, bait ball fish, are oftentimes at the high end, where they can see 100, 150 events per second. That lets them avoid the shark. And the shark is much slower, sometimes somewhere between 15 and 30 things per second that it can see. Sharks have evolved to heat their brains and their eyes to speed that up a little bit, so they're better at seeing fast movements of the fish they're trying to eat. So there's a bit of a literal game of cat and mouse with perceiving time that happens in, for example, the ocean. And the question of whether or not that means that time feels stretched or compressed is the bait ball fish. Oh, where's the shark experiences it? We don't know. These are really interesting questions.
That brings up the thought, like in those animals, when the bait fish is seeing things so quickly, does it look to the shark as if that fish is looking into the future? As if that fish is predicting the shark's movements? There's actually an anime that we watch all the time, and the main character was fighting one of the boss fights, and the guy had such strong perception that it looked as if he was seeing into the future. So the main character would go in and do something, and the guy's already there. He's like, "I got your leg. I'm gonna throw you up against the wall." And he had to heighten his senses in order to match that, where time was still the same, but both of them looked as if they were moving time.
In a way, that baseball fish is in the shark's future, but only because the shark is farther back in time. It's farther in the past in his perception of what's happening.
That makes sense.
So yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
Living out in the shark's future.
That's awesome.
Basically, what you were saying, kind of went back to the pandemic exception. I can say that when the pandemic started, it was the longest year and a half for me, because I was in that way of, I'm not working, I don't know what I'm gonna do, and my days get slower and they get worse and worse and worse. What was good for it is that slowed everything down, so my mental health. So when I was starting to be in the present, it started going like this. I'm still in the pandemic over the next year and a half, but I can't specifically tell those moments because I was in the moment. So it was making me think, saying the intuition of a shark and fish back when it was, the dinosaurs over here, when we was here, we was in the moment because it was either live or die. So how much of our intuition was future sight of not just being survival, but it's like how can I be in time to survive? Still, like,
Because that's what it becomes.
Saber-tooth, yeah.
You become the predictor from your perception. You have to perceive this is going to happen at this certain event in our time concept in order to not be eaten, essentially. So yeah, I think the same idea, before we're at the top of the food chain.
Does anybody have experience with like Buddhist meditation, anything like that? Because I'd be curious, like, how does that affect your sense of time? Because you're fully in the present as the goal.
I have lost, in a good yoga session, I had lost how long. So, it was 30 minutes, and it felt like 2 hours or something else. Should have been a short amount of time, like it felt a lot of time to just pass.
Wow, that's interesting.
This is kind of touching on it, with like changing your perception of how much time is passing. But I've heard a lot of stuff about how we're following time, like following the seasons, following things in history that come up. But I think about music and that you're controlling time and you're also affecting like, when you have a certain beat, everybody already knows what to expect next, and then you pause it, and you're like screwing with people's minds, like doing that pause type of thing. But like, what situations are you actually, like, expanding on that, like controlling time, either through music or in what other, like, at what points are you not at the mercy of time?
That's interesting.
And, you know, musician as well as technology. I do look through the same lens he does when it comes to the beat. I play instruments. I have no choice but to adhere to it or it won't come out right. However, with me being a singer, I also look at time based on the generation of music, the era that this music is coming from. So if you think about time back in the 60s and the 70s, if you look at the Black culture and how we were going through, you know, oppression and things like this, our music spoke to them. So it was a lot slower until we were doing things to try to uplift ourselves. So then you had these speakeasies and we had these back bars we weren't supposed to be in, and now we're jamming and making beats and moving at a different pace. So then I look at how all of those characteristics of music now affect our current day music. And how our current artists, who a lot of them have no sense of time, have no sense of history at all,
Or rhythm.
but they're having to reach back to those original artists that gave us what music has now become to fuel their current artistry. So a lot of times when I find myself writing or I'm singing stuff, I find myself going back to listen to a Patti LaBelle or the Pointer Sisters, or even digging into my gospel bag and I'm going back to Mahalia Jackson. Because I need to feel what they felt for me to get that emotion evoked. The time period they're going through then is not the same as what I'm going through now. So sometimes to get certain emotions out because it wasn't necessarily my story, I have to go listen to somebody else's from a different time period. So that's a lot of how I tie time to music.
Yeah, I was thinking too about like DJs and like the
That's what I was just gonna say.
and dropping the beat.
And there's a thing, even more so over than dropping the beat and the time, depending on what music you're playing is how your crowd would perceive their evening's time going. So if everything's upbeat and you're dancing the night away and you're having a great time is going quickly. And they, you know, sometimes consciously will slow down your evening. Let's play something a little slower, get your breath, let everybody go get a drink. And you consciously feel time slowing down, at least your perception of it. And another thing I thought of with music here lately is with the rhythm itself. New rap music as an overall idea, there's exceptions of course, is the same tempo as old slow jams. You know what I mean? You had stuff that's 70 beats per minute, and they're doing rap music now at 70 beats per minute. They may put it at 140 in their little programs, but it's the same thing. And I was like, that changes the nature of how the time in that genre of music is even perceived. There are young guys who come up to me and say, man, that song is so fast, yet it's technically much slower than what
And
they're
it's
doing.
interesting too that music can kind of create different mental states, right? When you're chanting, or right if you're in church and you're singing the same kind of thing over and over again, right? That you can become in a like heightened state of spiritual ecstasy, and you feel the spirit, and so you begin to you have a different experience of time and of life, and that like music and beat and rhythm is what can kind of take you there as sort of meditative relationship to beat and sound. It seems very similar to like that control the DJ has, that relationship the DJ has to the crowd.
And you think of the effect of certain vibrations on the body and what response it invokes, even if it's like, you know, there's certain things that hearing an 808, low 808 drummer is gonna do to you. And there's certain things that hearing a high guitar riff are gonna, you know what I mean? So those things, that's.
I think too, thinking about how long songs used to be compared to the length that they are now. You might buy an album that, I feel like it's rare to find an album with 20 songs on it at this point, but the entire album might happen in 60 minutes or less. Whereas if you think back to Morse Day and the Time is what's coming to me right now because 7779311 is an 8-minute song.
Absolutely.
And so you have the singing, you have the verses, you have the chorus, but then there is like 3 or 4 minutes at the end, and it's just instrumentation. And that's not something that you hear, I think, in modern music very often, especially not in
modern popular
music. Not in pop music. Now, you might get that in jazz. You may get that in some indie music, but popular music is 2 minutes and it's done. And it's like, wait, where'd it go?
Yeah. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for coming. I'm sorry that we have to wrap up. We've definitely gone over time. But I do want to invite you to attend. We lost track of time. Sensing time. Right. Please attend the next Alloy 11. Where is that? When is it? Right, Clovernook.
Center for the Blind and Vision Impaired in College Hill.
That's right, in College Hill, and that's next month. So you're all on the list. I'm sure we'll send you some information. So thank you very much again.
Cassandra, thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely.
You ever been working on